Let's start off with how you ended up getting to where you are today as an activist, as a supporter of the one state solution. Kind of give us the background of your family and your history in Israel.
Sure. I was born in Jerusalem to a very, very prominent Zionist family. I have a signer of the Declaration of Independence, a president of the state. My father was a general, and other members of the family who held, important positions both in the establishment of Israel and in the early decades of the state. And so I was as staunch patriotic Zionist as you could possibly be. And then gradually, as the subtitle of my book, The General Son, suggests, I began what I call the journey of an Israeli into Palestine. And the journey of an Israeli into Palestine really forces us to think about two things. Number one, what's an Israeli? What is Israel? And what is Palestine? Where is Palestine? And that journey, which is actually began in the United States with my first meetings with Palestinians, took me to this realm of the other that I was never a part of. I never knew about. I never learned about. And even though I was born and raised in Jerusalem, which many people think is a mixed city, and in many ways it is, but it's a completely segregated city, just like the rest of the country is segregated. So I was, minutes away from Palestinian neighborhoods, but our lives were different. We never met. I mean, the segregation was complete. And then, like I said, I started meeting Palestinians here in the United States. That's really where the journey began. And then gradually began to hear this other story, this other narrative. Now, coming from the family that I came from, I had no doubt that I had full possession of the truth. And suddenly I'm sitting across the table with some very nice people, very intelligent people, and they're literally telling me that night is day and day is night. And what many Israelis, this was the context was a Jewish-Palestinian dialogue group that in the early 2000s was very popular in Southern California. And I couldn't dismiss these people as many other Jews and Israelis did. These people, I mean the Palestinians. And I began to look into it deeper and look into it deeper. And then I read what some of the, new Israeli historians were writing, people like Ilan Pappé and others, and kind of began to meet Palestinians, to travel myself into Palestinian cities, both within 1948, which is called Israel, and within the West Bank, and of course Jerusalem. And I realized that I was born as an Israeli in Palestine, that the entire country was Palestine, and it's just had been occupied and renamed. And thus the journey of an Israeli, which is this really new creation of a people, people who came to colonize Palestine, Jewish people who came to colonize Palestine, who are now this new people that exist and live in Palestine. And we are in Palestine, and we are occupiers, and we are colonizers. And there's no such thing as a good occupation. There's no such thing as a, benign colonizer. That doesn't exist. And gradually, step by step, through these interactions, through the travel, through speaking with Palestinians, and I remember the minute this happened, actually, the actual moment that I realized the one state, two state conversation is the wrong conversation. The reality is that there exists a one state over all of Palestine, and that's the apartheid state of Israel. The two state is a myth. There is no option for a two state. Even if there was one a long time ago, Israel made it impossible, completely took it off the table with facts on the ground. And so the option is a one state, which is called Israel, gives privileges to people like myself at the expense of Palestinians, which is apartheid, which is a crime against humanity. Or we fight for, if we believe in democracy and we believe in equal rights and we believe in justice, then we fight for a single democracy with equal rights, a free Palestine, a free democratic Palestine with equal rights, and mechanisms for allowing refugees to return. So that was kind of an intersection for me, a fork in the road, where I had to choose, where do my values lie? Yes, my family was a big part of the creation of this new thing, of the state of Israel. But basically, the narrative, the story of the creation of Israel, the story of the Jews coming to colonize as opposed to the Jews coming to make the desert bloom. I had to make a choice. Where do I feel comfortable in terms of my values? And my values led me to believe that only a single democracy, a free democratic Palestine with equal rights, is the only other option if we don't accept the violence and racism.
And we can get into that because I still do believe in a two-state solution. So we could kind of debate this as the time goes on here. But I want to get into your childhood and growing up. Where did your family originally come from?
On my mother's side, they came from Belarus. On my father's side, they came from Ukraine. But basically, Russia, Ukraine, Eastern Europe. That's we're Ashkenazi Jews.
Yeah, and so who immigrated into Israel? Was it your grandfather who signed the
My
Declaration of
grandparents,
Independence?
yeah.
Your grandparents came
Yes,
in.
the
Okay.
generation of my grandparents is what's called the third immigration, the third migration, or the third aliyah, and these were really, really dedicated and idealistic, if you can use that word, Zionists who came to establish a Jewish state. I mean, I have a poster hidden somewhere of advertising a lecture by my grandfather in 1920 in Kiev or something. He was part of this group of Zionist, young Zionist diplomats. And he was a doctor by then, and they were all doctors and chemists and, very highly
Hmm.
intelligent, highly educated. They spoke 5 languages. They didn't look like Jews. They shaved their beards, and they were going around the world convincing the Europeans that Zionism is the right thing and trying to convince Jews around the world that they need to leave their homes and their life, mind you, in Europe. They were not talking about
Hmm.
other countries, to come to Palestine to create a state for Jewish people. So I grew
And
up
this was
with that
before
and
the
knowing
Holocaust, right? I mean, and I think
this
this
is
is an
long
important
before the
point.
Holocaust.
Yeah, this is an
Oh,
important point
yes.
to bring up because a lot of people believe that this was created after the Holocaust, that this was a reaction, that the state of Israel is a reaction to the Holocaust, that is when the world realized, well, the Jews need a home where they can be safe, a home of their own, where they're not going to have this type of persecution. But what you're laying out is that this was going on in the 20s. This was way before the Holocaust.
Oh, yes. I mean, both my parents were born in Palestine. I mean, on their passport, the original passport and birth certificate, it says Palestine. And my father was born in Haifa, which is a very old Palestinian city. My mother was born in Jerusalem before the ethnic cleansing. So there were very large Palestinian neighborhoods in West Jerusalem, which were all completely ethnically cleansed in 1948. And they were first generation Israelis, if you will. I mean, there was no Israel yet, but they were these, very zealots. My father went, and in high school he began his military training. It was covert military training. These were people, and my mother was part of this youth movement that would go around and telling Jews they should stop talking any other language but Hebrew. And so they were zealots, and they were determined to build and create a state for Jews, in Palestine.
What was the reasoning when they were going around Europe and trying to convince all these Jews to move to Palestine and create Israel? What was the reasoning back before the Holocaust?
Well, there are many reasons. I mean, the early Zionists felt excluded, even though they were highly educated and supposedly immersed in the cultures where they lived. They still, to a certain degree, felt excluded, and they created an organization, which, by the way, most Jewish people rejected completely, and many Jewish people reject even to this day. And they had this idea that Zionism is the future of the Jewish people. And what's very interesting about that is that the vast majority of Jewish people, especially in Central Europe at the time, were Orthodox Jews, were religious people. The idea of these kind of secular Jews was kind of rather modern, enlightened, what they call enlightened Jews. And by 1920, Zionism was really just at beginning its first steps. Um, all the major rabbis of Europe came out with a book warning Jewish people about the dangers of Zionism. And they said basically 3 things. They said Zionism, or this idea of a Jewish state in Palestine, is going to bring violence to the Holy Land, which it
Mm,
did.
yeah.
It will ruin the good relations that exist between Jews and Arabs and Jews and Muslims around the world. There are large communities, massive communities of Jewish people, everywhere in Iraq, in Northern Africa, in Yemen, in Iran, and so on. And they said it will cast doubt as to the loyalty of Jewish people who are citizens of the world. Are they
Mm,
citizens of this new thing, or are they citizens of where they belong? And it was like prophetic, because those three things have been happening, as we all know, including the third one, which is very dangerous because it made it very difficult for Jewish people to sometimes say, well, we have nothing to do with this new thing. We are, we are Iraqi Jews, or whatever the case may be, or American Jews today, or so forth and so forth. So, but that was they wanted this new modern European place for Jewish people to live as Europeans and thrive and have independence, some kind of independence. That was their motivation.